Good morning. Welcome to episode 66 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'll be joined by Hacker of Hacker After Dark, which you can listen to on 1010XL/92.5 FM radio from 8 to 10 p.m. Hacker brings on a really good assortment of guests. He's always great himself. We loved having him on for the post-game show of Duval Rundown after each Jaguars game during the 2024 season. So, Hacker, really looking forward to having you on each Friday going forward. Welcome back to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, Gus, congrats on the daily show here, man. It's awesome. I'll be happy to be here with you every Friday.
Appreciate that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to where we can take it. And so one thing that I am trying to do is kind of make segments for each show. Like Hayes and I started doing a lot of top 5 lists on Tuesdays. Me and I just debuted a new stock exchange segment yesterday. And Hacker, I was thinking you and I could try to at least do a gambling / fantasy related segment, especially since during the season, Fridays will be kind of leading into the weekend. So I think that'll be a good thing to do. So it's going to be overs and unders where Hack and I come up with numbers before the show and then guess whether certain players or the team as a whole or whatever it may be is going to go over or under a line that we set. And so today, Hacker, I figure we can also do this exercise after free agency and after the draft and during the real deep offseason where there's not much going on. But today, Hacker and I are going to go over 2024 stat projections for various Jaguars on both offense and defense. There's not really any true stat projections out yet for the 2025 season, so I just kind of guesstimated my way to what a good line would be. And so we're going to start out with Trevor Lawrence and again, go through several players on both offense and defense. But starting with Trevor, I figure we look at passing yards in each season, starting with 2021, he's thrown for 3,641 yards, 4,113 yards, 4,016 yards, and then last season, just 2,045 yards because of injuries. And so, Hacker, the line I'm setting for Trevor Lawrence in 2025 is 4,200 passing yards, which would mean he'd set a new career record for passing yards. And so specifically, I'm asking, do you think Trevor Lawrence is going to go over or under 4,200 passing yards next year? But really, I'm asking, do you think it's going to be a career season for Trevor?
It needs to be. I would say over because year 5, man. I mean, we can't really refer to him as a young quarterback anymore. He's going to be 26 years old in October. So he'll be 26 for a majority of the 2025 season. And we talk about, a young quarterback, an up-and-coming quarterback. Well, no, he's not. He's getting to that point where he should be entering the prime of his career. And it's unfortunate. I talked about this last night. The Jaguars haven't exactly dealt him a favorable hand, right? His third different head coach in 5 years, his third different offensive coordinator in 5 years. It's not been exactly the epitome of perfection when handling your franchise quarterback, but hopefully now with Liam Cohen and Grant Udinski and Spencer Whipple and all the young offensive minds they have in the building, hopefully we can see Trevor Lawrence become what we all hope he still is, which is that franchise type guy.
Yeah, I think I would have gone over even if Doug Peterson and Press Taylor and even Trent Baalke were all retained, because I think regardless, I would expect Trevor Lawrence to be able to take the leap. To me, it's definitely one of those, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when questions. And he'll say himself that like the number one priority for him right now is just staying on the field so that he can produce such numbers. But I think if he is able to stay on the field for 16 or 17 games, he should be able to pass this number easily, especially with the new coaching staff. I mentioned the same point that you just made a couple times on the show, where I think the biggest thing that stands out to me about Liam Cohen's coaching staff as a whole is just how well built they seem to be to develop a quarterback, and specifically Trevor, obviously, because I think that's the main reason that a lot of these coaches took the job in Jacksonville. But really, if any quarterback was in that just current ecosystem of coaches around him with Grant Udinski, Spencer Whipple, obviously Liam Cohen, then I'd be feeling pretty good about what my quarterback could do, especially after Liam Cohen helped Baker Mayfield set various career records last year. Not just career records, but also Tampa Bay Buccaneers franchise records. So, yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to go over 4,200 passing yards for Trevor Lawrence. Next one is Brian Thomas Jr., who ranked 3rd in the NFL as a rookie last year with 1,282 receiving yards. I'm going to go the opposite way and actually lower this number a little bit for the 2025 line, just because obviously there was a lot of injuries last year in Jacksonville, especially to the pass catching group. And so I think we saw that Brian Thomas is certainly capable of being like the focal point of an offense and really carrying an offense. But with better help throughout the entire roster, it's probably less likely that he's going to reach the amount of targets that he did last year. And on top of that, now defenses are going to have that 2024 tape and say, all right, this guy's a legit receiver. We need to make sure that he's not going to just absolutely wreck this game for us. And so in general, I'm expecting for Brian to maybe not hit 1,282 yards again. And so Hacker, the line I'm setting is 1,200 yards, which would still be an incredible feat. I think it would be putting him in rare company to have consecutive 1,200-yard seasons. And so over under 1,200 yards for Brian Thomas in 2025, Hacker.
Yeah, this one's hard. I could see it going both ways because Brian Thomas was good in the first 10, 11 weeks of the year with Trevor Lawrence. Brian Thomas was great when Mac Jones was out there because they just decided to throw him the ball 10, 12, 14 times a game. Now, a lot of that, like you said, had to do with Christian Kirk's injury, Gabe Davis's injury, Evan Ingram missed, the last couple of games. So Brian Thomas was like literally the only guy they really had in the passing game, which certainly helped him. But Brian Thomas was a different player. And if you get a full 17 games out of Trevor Lawrence, how would that also affect Brian Thomas? Because again, Mac Jones wasn't exactly throwing 30, 40, 50-yard seam routes to Brian Thomas at the end of the
Right.
year. Trevor Lawrence can do that. So I honestly, Gus, could probably see this going both ways. I'm going to agree with you until I see what they do in free agency and see what they ultimately do with Christian Kirk, because I think that's a big question. But even so, I mean, if Brian Thomas in 2025 comes out and even has 1,150 yards. I mean, you're talking 2,400 yards in the first 2 years of an NFL career. That would be phenomenal. I think
Mm-hmm.
Jaguar fans are expecting it to go up from 1,282 to 13, 14, even 1,500. That's rarefied air. Not a lot of wide receivers have 1,500-yard seasons. So I'm going to say under, but I'm very curious about the Trevor factor if they play a full 17 games together.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go over here just because I think I want to be on the stance this offseason of like not being too low on Brian Thomas in any way possible. And as we both just said, like even if he has 1,100 yards instead of 1,200, like that's still a phenomenal season and still a phenomenal start to his overall professional career. But yeah, you kind of hinted at this, but like to me, even if he's going to see a decrease in targets, I think he's going to see an uptick in efficiency because I mean, just generally, a full season of Trevor Lawrence would give him better looking targets and better production in general. Go ahead.
Well, no, you made a good point too, in that defensive coordinators will have tape on him, and that's
Right.
true, but they won't have Liam Cohen offensive tape on him.
Mm.
How is Liam Cohen and Udensky and Whipple and all these guys going to use him? That to me is a big question. So as much as defensive coordinators can scout and game plan and double and whatever Brian Thomas, they only have the Doug Peterson film. They don't have what Liam Cohen could potentially do. And you think back to what Cohen did with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin before he got hurt, heck, Jalen McMillan as well. I'm very intrigued by that.
Yeah, it'll be a good challenge for Cohen, honestly, because on one hand, defenses are going to be doing anything they can to stop Brian Thomas, especially over the top. But I mean, on the other hand, he's already one of the best deep threats in the NFL. And I think Trevor Lawrence is still one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL. And so you got to be able to somehow make that connection work and not just let defenses be able to dictate what you do as an offense. Like you got to be able to take advantage of those two guys' amazing athleticism to be able to truly stretch the field. And so, yeah, I think that Liam Cohen is going to figure out a way to stretch the field and get Brian Thomas better horizontal targets or better vertical targets. And then I certainly expect Trevor Lawrence to hit on those at a higher rate than we saw Mac Jones at the end of last year. And so you're going under, I'm going over, but obviously we both agree that Brian Thomas is awesome. We expect big things from him going forward. I refrain from including Christian Kirk or Evan Ingram on this list because I do expect both of them back, especially Christian Kirk. But I just thought this situation or this segment might be murky because we aren't sure. And so I would just went on to other players. And so for this next one, instead of an over-under for one player, we're going to do a player against each other. So, Hacker, who do you think is going to have more receiving yards in 2025? Gabe Davis or Parker Washington? For context, last year, Gabe Davis finished with 239 yards, but obviously his season was cut short due to injury. Parker Washington had 390 receiving yards.
This is nothing against Parker Washington because I really like Parker Washington. He's one of the few guys in the locker room I can actually almost look at eye to eye with when I'm doing an interview. So I appreciate that from Parker Washington. If he has more receiving yardage than Gabe Davis, that is a gigantic problem because Gabe Davis is going to be getting paid $13 million a year. And look, I know Gabe Davis had an awful knee injury against Detroit, and it cost him. I hope there's a firewood under him because you could argue that Gabe Davis's best game as a Jaguar was a horrific performance. And that was the one in London where he caught 2 touchdowns, but he also dropped 2 touchdowns against the Bears. Gabe Davis was a bust as a free agent in 2024. I mean, let's call it what it is. People want to give Eric Armstead grief. At least Armstead played, right? Gabe Davis didn't do very much, and then he got hurt. And $13 million for what? You could argue Gabe Davis was every bit as big as a bust as Eric Armstead, if not bigger. So Gabe Davis better have more receiving yardage than Parker Washington, because if he doesn't, that's not good.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a good one, too, to kind of temper fan expectations, because I think that people are rightfully excited by Parker Washington, but unfortunately, it's probably not going to be his time this season, especially if Christian Kirk is retained. But even if Christian Kirk isn't retained, I think that Gabe Davis would probably play more snaps and then also be more productive than Parker Washington, because I think that money has a big thing to do with that, as you said. Like, you're going to want the $13 million receiver to be on the field if you're paying him like that. But then also it comes down to versatility, where Gabe Davis can almost line up as like a pseudo tight end in the line of scrimmage and deliver those types of blocks on defensive ends better than most wide receivers can because of his size. But then he can technically line up in the slot, but what he can really do is line up at X receiver against press coverage out on the perimeter. And he might not be great at that, but he's better than pretty much any receiver on the Jaguars not named Brian Thomas Jr. at that. And so the fact that he can go to like all these different spaces or spots on the field is valuable, because Parker Washington, he definitely has like the grit and the tenacity, but he doesn't really have the size for blocking bigger guys than him. He also doesn't really have the size to play a perimeter role outside. I know they did okay in that role a little bit last year, but if you're putting Parker Washington like out wide as a receiver, then you're doing it because you have to, because of the depth of your receiver room, not because you're trying to maximize Parker Washington's strengths. He's a guy that shines in the slot and really should be in the slot. And so I agree with you. It should be Gabe Davis is the best way to put it, I think.
Well, let me ask you this. Now, again, that's if Christian Kirk is back. If Christian Kirk's not back and Parker Washington has a more prominent role, as you mentioned, then maybe there's a different conversation there. But I had Mike Giannetti, the founder of Spot Track, on Hacker After Dark on Monday, and we had the Christian Kirk conversation. I know we put one of those sound bites on the 1010XL MyBookie digital platform. He basically said, look, it's $10.5 million if you cut Christian Kirk. That's what you save right off the bat. Is Christian Kirk worth that? Or is it worth $10.5 million to release Kirk, maybe try to bring him back on the open market? Or do you want to take that $10.5 million and spend it elsewhere? Kirk has been a nice player, but back-to-back years with season-ending injuries is probably a red flag at this point.
Yeah, I think if the Jags were like a Madden simulation, then it would be a pretty easy decision to move on from Christian Kirk, especially with Parker Washington there in the wings. But because it's not a simulation, and obviously there's a human element involved, I am at this point expecting that to win out, where Christian Kirk obviously has a great relationship with Trevor Lawrence, but then also seems to have a good relationship with multiple new staff members. And so, yeah, we'll definitely see what happens there. But to move on to two players who definitely will be on the roster again in 2025, who do you think is going to have more yards from scrimmage, Hacker, Tank Bigsby or Travis Etienne? last season, for context, ETN had 812 and Bigsby had 820. So it was a pretty tight race last year.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that close. You're just talking about total yards from scrimmage, rushing, receiving, everything?
Rushing and receiving, yeah. And so I think Bigsby actually had a couple hundred more rushing yards, but then ETN evened it out with his receiving production.
Yeah, I would guesstimate, you look at any two-back combo in the league, you probably didn't have anything closer than that as far as total yardage between two guys. That's wild. I didn't know that. Boy, you'd like for it to be ETN. It's a contract year for him. He's a former first-round pick. But Tank Bigsby really came on at the end of the year. I think they're both going to be used very prevalently, but I think because ETN has the bigger home run factor, ETN is much more likely to break a 70-yarder than
Mhm.
Bigsby is. I would probably give the slight edge to ETN. But if you want to talk about, if you need 3rd and 3, you need to get 4 yards, I'm taking Bigsby all day long. 3rd and 1, you need to get a first down, I'm taking Bigsby all day long. But because ETN might have that 70-yard factor that Bigsby doesn't, I'll take Travis by a hair.
Yeah, I definitely feel on that. I honestly think that it could be pretty similar rushing productions in large part because of what you said, where even if Tank is technically more efficient, I think Travis is definitely more explosive and can kind of chew up more yards than Tank can. And so I think it'll end up being pretty even in the rushing stats. And then for the receiving stats, I think that Travis will, again, kind of blow Tank out of the water a little bit because I think Tank Travis definitely needs to work on his pass protection and different elements of the passing game, but Tank Bigsby really needs to work on his pass protection and obviously catching and holding onto the ball and a few different things. So I don't think the last year's coaching staff had a lot of trust in ETN to be on the field on 3rd downs, but they seem to have zero trust in Tank Bigsby to be on the field. And so it's kind of similar to what I said about Gabe Davis versus Parker Washington. Like if you can just be on the field for more snaps, then obviously that'll go a long way. So I agree with you there. I think it'll be ETN, but by a hair probably. So similar one, who will have more sacks in 2025, Josh-Hines Allen or Trayvon Walker? In 2024, Walker had 10.5 sacks to Hines Allen's 8, but the year before that, Walker had 10 sacks to Hines Allen's 17.5, which was a franchise single-season record. And so who do you got this year, Hack, in 2025, more sacks?
Yeah, that's another tough one. I tend to think Josh-Hines Allen will. But again, Trayvon Walker's been very, very good, and he came on late at the end of the year, just like he did the year prior. But I think Hines Allen going from 17 sacks and basically having that cut in half to 8 probably will light a little bit of a fire under him. He's been kind of doubted. He was kind of talked bad about by fan base, media, that he did not have a great year in 2024, even though he had, 8 sacks is a decent year. You look at like Josh Sweat in Philadelphia. He's about to get paid, right, in free agency. He had 8 sacks, But you look at 8 sacks for Josh-Hines Allen as a down year because he had 17 the year prior. So I think Hines Allen's going to rebound, but Trayvon Walker's a good football player. I give the edge to Hines Allen, but I could see something where Hines Allen has 12 sacks, Trayvon has 11. I don't think it's going to be a big difference whatsoever. And I'm very curious how both guys will be affected by Eric Armstead actually playing where he's supposed to play.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting. And what else will be interesting, Gus, is when they don't do hockey line changes anymore. And on 3rd and 7, when you actually need to rush the opposing quarterback, I'm willing to bet 41 and 44 might actually be out there this year, as opposed to not being out there at times last year.
Yeah, I think we can attribute part of the relative down year for Hines Allen to him putting on a lot of weight. I think it was pretty evident to anyone who just turned on a Jaguars game that Hines Allen clearly bulked up to go from a 3-4 outside linebacker without a hand in the dirt to going from a 4-3 defensive end with a hand in the dirt. And so the Jaguars coaching staff asked him to bulk up a little bit so that he'd play a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, technically, even though he was already on the line of scrimmage. And so I think that maybe with better coaching staff, better vision, then we'll see another really good season from Hines Allen. So that's my pick too, because we've already seen 17.5 sacks from Hines Allen. And so he's already established that he's a top 12 edge rusher in the NFL, and it'll be really interesting to see Trayvon Walker how he does this year, because like, is he going to kind of just like taper out or plateau out at about 10 sacks each year, or does he still have like another year in him and he can get up to like 16 or 17 sacks and start competing with Hines Allen at the same time for various franchise records? I don't doubt it, but it's just a thing we got to wait to see whether Trayvon Walker does have that extra year as a pass rusher.
And I'm not sure how much this will play into it, but something to at least keep in mind is, does Trayvon Walker get extended before the year? Right? Do they pay Trayvon Walker and make him one of the highest paid, young edge rushers in the league? Do they not extend him and make him play in year 4 and then extend him? How much of a fire would that light under him? I think the contract situation, he's going to be here regardless, but does he get extended before the year? Does he not get extended? What kind of a motivating factor is that? I think that's something to watch for this offseason with Walker.
Absolutely. That's a great point. We got 2 more before we get out of here. One more like player versus player, but this is just player over under for Foye Oluokun. Combined sacks. This is his combined sack numbers in each season of his career, starting when he was a rookie in 2018. He had 91 combined tackles. 91, 62, 117, 192, 184, 173, and then 108 last year. And so the line I'm setting is 150 combined tackles, which he went under last year, but again, he went over the previous 3 years. And in those 3 years, he either tied for the league lead or was just straight up the league leader in combined tackles. And so Foye Oluokun has gone from one of the best tacklers and one of the best middle inside linebackers in the league to kind of similar to Hines Allen having not a down year, but just relatively for his standards, a down year in 2024. And so 150 combined tackles hacker over under that. Do you think it'll be a bounce back season for Foye Oluokun?
Well, you read those numbers out, the guy is a tackling machine, man. There's no doubt about that. I hope it's under, and I'll tell you why. Because I hope teams are throwing the ball against Jacksonville, because I hope Jacksonville finally has the lead in some of these games. I mean, when Jacksonville's losing, teams just run the ball in the second half, and Foye can compile all these tackles because teams are just running out the clock. I hope this Liam Cohen offense scores a little bit, and Jacksonville actually plays with a lead, which would be a novel concept because it hasn't happened very much in recent memory, and teams are forced to throw it, and maybe that will cost Foye some tackles. So my hope is it's under 150, to be honest, but because he's so good, and I still obviously question how good this team will be overall, I'll say 150 is a great number, and I'll say he's just a smidge over that.
Nice. I'm going to go over 2 just because I've said a lot of times over the years I think he's probably the biggest competitor out of anyone on the team, just based on what I've seen in the locker room, just emotion-based, I guess, but in a good way. And so I think that he's definitely going to be motivated to have a bounce-back year. And I think that he does have kind of a similar story as Hines Allen, where it's not weight-related, but the previous coaching staff kind of put him out of position by asking him to do something new. And they literally put him out of position because they switched him and Devin Lloyd's roles, where Foye went from the middle Mike linebacker to the weak side Will linebacker, and then vice versa for Devin Lloyd. And so I don't know if they did that more so to help out Devin and maybe try to that would help slow the game down for him, or if they thought that by putting Foye at weak side linebacker, he would have kind of more range and more ability to make plays. But I think that we saw that Foye definitely can play will linebacker. He still had over 100 combined tackles, and as someone in the comments pointed out, he did miss a couple of games last year. But I think that his true strength is at middle linebacker. So I'm excited to see what new defensive coordinator Anthony Campanile does with the entire linebacker room, really, but especially with Foye Oluokun, because I think he's the clear-cut leader. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to get up to 170, 180, 190 combined tackles anymore, especially since he is getting closer to his year 30 season. But I'm also going over 150 tackles. So, last one for you today, Hacker. Who will have more pass breakups in 2025? Tyson Campbell or Jarian Jones? For context, last year, Tyson Campbell had 6 pass breakups and Jarian Jones had 8.
Jones played a lot more than Campbell because Campbell obviously missed a lot of time.
Mm.
You would hope it's Campbell, but having said that, do offenses throw at Jones more to avoid throwing at Campbell? That's always the interesting question when it comes to things like this. I'll say Jones gets more of an opportunity for people not wanting to throw towards Tyson. So I'll say Jones has more pass breakups.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that even if they had like the same amount of targets thrown their way, then I would still probably pick Jones because I think that generally he's probably a better ball disruptor than Tyson Campbell is. But also, like the areas of the field that they cover make it a lot harder for Tyson to be able to have ball production as opposed to Jarian, especially when you're playing man coverage. I mean, if they're both playing zone coverage and they have like their eyes to the quarterback, then it's easier to make plays on the ball. But if they're both manned up, then Tyson is going to have like his back to the quarterback a lot of times playing out in the perimeter, whereas Jarian might have his back to the quarterback at times, but also a lot of times like the slot receivers that he'll be covering are really just going to be making one break, which will allow him to just make one break and try to react to the ball. And so I think you make a great point. I definitely expect for more balls to be thrown at Jarian Jones, partly because Tyson Campbell is a caliber of player that you just don't want to target, but also even if Jarian Jones is great, which I think we all agree that he's ascending towards that category, typically like quarterbacks just like throwing to the slot more because there's more space to operate. And so I think he will end up getting targeted more, and I think he will end up getting more pass breakups. And so let's recap this real quick, starting with the top. Hacker and I both think Trevor Lawrence is going to go over 4,200 passing yards in 2025. I think Brian Thomas is going to go just over 1,200 yards. Packer thinks he's going to go just under, but we both agree, expecting big things from BT. We both expect Gabe Davis to have more receiving yards than Parker Washington. We both expect Travis Etienne to have slightly more yards from scrimmage than Tank Bigsby. Both expect Josh-Hines Allen to have more sacks than Trayvon Walker. We both expect Jarian Jones to have more pass breakups than Tyson Campbell. And we are both optimistic that Foye Oluokun is going to surpass 150 combined tackles in 2025. And so that'll do it for this episode. Hacker, thanks so much for joining. I thought that was a lot of fun. I don't know if you have any comments, questions, concerns, any lingering thoughts before we get out of here.
No, I'm pretty good. I appreciate you having me on. Again, I'm looking forward every Friday being with you here on Duval Rundown. You've done a great job with this. Again, congratulations on being 5 days a week, and looking forward to spending Friday mornings with you.
Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it too, Hacker. Appreciate it as always. Appreciate everyone for watching and listening. Hope everyone has a good weekend. I will see you guys back here at 9:04 a.m. Eastern on Monday.